Tonight, you will lie in bed and stare at the ceiling for 20 minutes before you fall asleep. You will find this annoying. You will assume something is wrong with you, that your body failed to shut down on schedule, that tomorrow you will pay for it. But the real answer is much stranger. That silent gap is not a malfunction. It is a leftover. It is a surviving fragment of a human night that lasted for 100,000 years and that you have never once experienced. Because for almost all of your species' history, night was not a solid block of unconsciousness. It was a place. It had geography. It had schedules, activities, hierarchies, rituals. It had a life happening inside it. And nearly everything you believe about sleeping was invented less than 200 years ago. Think about what happens when the sun sets today. You flip a switch. Light fills the room. Nothing changes except the number on the clock. Now erase that. Erase the switch, the lamp, the screen, the lit street outside. Erase the idea that darkness is optional. What is left is the world your ancestors lived in every single night of their lives. And in that world, the dark did not arrive all at once. Came down in layers. First the deep blue when you can still see silhouettes. Then the near black when outlines dissolve. Then true black where your hand in front of your face becomes a theory. Each of those layers had a human behavior attached to it. The historian Roger Ekirch spent 16 years digging through court records, private diaries, medical texts, plays, and literature spanning more than 500 years of European history. He was not looking for sleep. He was researching something else entirely. And then he began tripping over a phrase that kept appearing in documents that had nothing to do with one another. First sleep, not sleep, first sleep, and then, further down in the same texts, another phrase, second sleep. Ekirch found more than 2,000 references to this pattern. In English, French, Italian, Latin. In courtroom testimony where witnesses described what they were doing when a crime occurred. In medical manuals offering advice about what to do between one sleep and the other. In letters where ordinary people mentioned the interval the way you might mention breakfast. Nobody explained what it was. Because nobody needed to. That was simply how everyone slept. You fell asleep roughly 2 hours after dark. You slept a block of 3 or 4 hours. And then you woke up. You did not wake in alarm. You did not wake with insomnia. You woke the way you naturally surface at the end of a cycle, with a clear mind and a quiet body. And then came the part your modern life erased completely. The interval. An hour, sometimes 2, of wakefulness in the middle of the night. Not an emergency. A room in the day. A space with its own uses. What did people do in there? They talked. Couples in the dark. Unhurried. Without an audience. Bodies already rested and minds still loose. Medical texts of the era explicitly recommended that window for intimacy, arguing a couple would be more willing after first sleep than after a full day of labor. They prayed. There were specific prayers written for that interval, with instructions on what to say upon waking in the middle of the night. They tended the fire. Someone had to feed the embers so the house would not be freezing by morning. They thought about their dreams. And here is the strange part. When you wake directly out of a block of deep sleep, you land on top of your dreams with them still intact. Not the crumbling scrap you retrieve in the morning. The whole thing still warm. Entire cultures built elaborate systems of dream interpretation on top of that purely mechanical detail. And they simply lay there, doing nothing, in a state the texts described as a particular stillness, neither sleep nor full waking. Have you ever felt that? That floating sensation at 3 in the morning, when there is nothing to do and no obligation pressing down, and the world seems paused? That has a physiological name. And this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. In the 1990s, the psychiatrist Thomas Wehr, at the National Institute of Mental Health in the United States, decided to test a simple question. What happens to modern human sleep when you remove artificial light? He gathered volunteers and placed them in a controlled environment with 14 hours of darkness per night. Roughly what a human being would face in a winter without electricity. For the first few weeks, they just slept. Enormously. Repaying a debt accumulated over years. And then, around the 4th week, something reorganized itself. Their sleep split in two. One block early in the night. an interval of wakefulness lasting 1 to 3 hours, a second block until dawn. Nobody asked them to do this. Nobody suggested it. The pattern simply emerged from modern bodies the moment artificial light was pulled out of the equation. Wehr measured the volunteer's blood during that interval and found something he had not expected: prolactin, a hormone that appears at elevated levels during breastfeeding, during deep meditation, in the moments a body classifies as safe. It was spiking during the nighttime waking, at levels comparable to someone in a trance. The participants described the state using words that echoed the ancient texts almost exactly: a stillness, an effortless calm, an awareness without urgency. Your body has a mode of operation that most people alive today have never experienced. So what happened? The short answer is street lighting. The long answer is more interesting. In the late 17th century, European cities began installing lamps in the streets. Paris first, then Amsterdam, then London. And suddenly night stopped being closed territory. Before that, going out after dark was almost criminal by definition. There were laws against it. Darkness belonged to thieves, ghosts, and madmen. With light, night became usable space. Cafes stayed open late. Theaters stretched their hours. Being awake stopped being suspicious and started being sophisticated. Then came gas. Then electricity. And every advance pushed bedtime a little further forward. The interval was squeezed from both ends. The night got shorter, and a sleep split in two does not fit inside a short night. So it collapsed into a single block. And within a few generations, humanity forgot entirely that it had ever slept another way. So thoroughly that when Ekirch published his findings, sleep historians were genuinely startled. A universal behavior, practiced by every one of your ancestors, vanished from collective memory in under 10 generations. Now comes the twist. There is a diagnosis called sleep maintenance insomnia. It describes a person who falls asleep normally, sleeps a few hours, wakes in the middle of the night, and cannot immediately fall back asleep. Millions of people receive that diagnosis. Millions take medication for it. Look at that description again. Falls asleep early. Sleeps a block. Wakes in the middle of the night. Stays awake a while. Returns to sleep. That is not a disorder. That is the ancestral pattern trying to resurface in a body that no longer recognizes it. Ekirch argued exactly this, and the idea is still debated among sleep researchers. Not every case of insomnia is biphasic sleep in disguise, and nobody serious claims that. But for some portion of people, the problem may not be the waking itself. The problem may be the panic that follows. Because look at what happens to you when you wake at 3 in the morning. You check the clock. You calculate the hours remaining. You think about the meeting. You tell yourself you need to sleep now, immediately, or tomorrow is ruined. Your body goes on alert. Cortisol rises. And cortisol is literally the hormone that exists to keep you from sleeping. You have built a perfect trap. The more desperately you try to fall back asleep, the more chemically impossible it becomes. Your ancestors woke at the same hour and felt none of this, because to them it meant nothing. It was just the interval. The night still had plenty left to offer. The difference between their experience and yours is not in the body. It is in the meaning. It is worth noting that not everyone slept this way. Researchers like Jerome Siegel at the University of California studied contemporary hunter-gatherer communities in Tanzania, Namibia, and Bolivia, all without electricity, and found mostly a single consolidated block of sleep, which suggests split sleep may have been tied especially to long winter nights at high latitudes, rather than being an absolute constant of the species. But that makes the finding more interesting, not less, because it means human sleep was never one thing. It is flexible. It responds to light, to season, to place. It reshapes itself as the world around it changes. And what you call normal sleep is simply the shape it took under conditions that have existed for about a century and a half. 8 uninterrupted hours. 1 block. 1 unit. That is not human nature. That is an industrial format. It arrived alongside the time clock, the factory shift, the need to synchronize human bodies to machines. And it works in its way. There is nothing wrong with sleeping in a single block. What is wrong is the certainty that anything else is illness. So tonight, when you wake at 3 in the morning and feel that familiar tightening in your chest, try something. Do not look at the clock. Do not calculate anything. Let the interval be an interval. Lie there in the dark and notice that you are exactly where billions of people before you have been, at the same hour, in the same stillness, with nothing to do. Maybe you fall asleep again in 15 minutes. Maybe it takes an hour. Either way, you are not broken. You are just visiting a room in the night that your species built across hundreds of thousands of years, and that electricity closed so quickly you never knew it was there. Tonight, you will lie in bed and stare at the ceiling. And now you know you are not waiting for sleep to arrive. You are standing inside something far older than the bed, than the house, than the light you switched off. You are simply in the night, the way it always was.